All right. Thank you again for joining us. And I would like to point out that the overarching premise of this work is to provide subject area content, resources, and strategies to help staff understand how attendance can impact a variety of health factors for school communities as it relates to health services, school climate, family engagement, and community involvement. To further empower schools and educators, the Maine Department of Education is launching a 4-part series to deeply explore portions of the Maine DOE Attendance Toolkit. Participants will delve into specific sections of the toolkit, examining resources and strategies designed to increase student attendance. Each session is going to feature content experts, offering a unique opportunity for schools to ask questions and develop actionable plans for implementation. Each webinar will be recorded for future access on the Maine DOE attendance page. This series is designed to provide targeted guidance for schools, ensuring the tools and strategies are integrated effectively into systems to address attendance challenges. So before we get going, let's talk about what the agenda is going to look like for today. We're going to start with some quick introductions, and then we're going to, I'll pass the baton to our content expert today, Jess Anderson. We will have some time to explore the toolkit, and then at about 3:55, we're going to break into breakout groups. We'll have about 15-ish minutes, and I will have some questions for you to ponder while you're with your team. And then we'll come back together for a quick wrap up. Altogether, this will take about 1 hour. And again, I thank you very much for joining us. Let's get started with some quick introductions. I am Sarah Nelson. I started in working with the Maine Department of Education in August of 2023. I've worked with members of the Office of School and Student Supports for the past 9 months, and I've actively collaborated with many of you in my role as the Student Engagement Specialist. Some of my role includes professional development, creating guidance for school personnel and community representatives statewide. Also, I have been assisting schools with implementation of student engagement practices. Today, we'll talk about some great practices that will help with attendance. I have been part of our team implementing DOE initiatives supporting the whole student, whole educator policy. One of the very large pieces of work that we're doing with student engagement includes our work with the regulated classroom. Those of you that have not yet signed up for the Winter Wellness Summit at the Samoset this Thursday and Friday, I welcome you to look into that. We will be talking more about those practices of regulation and how they impact attendance. I also assist with integration of evidence-based engagement practices that align with the Maine state and district strategy plans. And finally, I have, this is the hat that I'm wearing today, is my work placing a spotlight on the efforts for increased attendance. Today, I'd like to welcome our content expert, Jess Anderson. She is the Executive Director of Count Me In. She has been the Executive Director since March of 2022. Prior to that, she worked in a variety of traditional and alternative education settings. She holds an MED with Plymouth State University with a specialty in experiential learning and human development. As you listen to Jess today, you're going to hear her very, very rich background coming through in the experiences that she'll be sharing with you today. She is a certified special education teacher. She's an emergency medical technician and a wilderness flight responder. As the executive director of Count Me In, Jess works tirelessly to increase student engagement and attendance through data-driven strategies so that every child is a successful learner. Count Me In partners with schools, businesses, families, youth, state, and community organizations to focus on reducing chronic absenteeism by improving student and family school engagement and school attendance. And as an outcome, we improve the academic achievement. Count Me In provides a plethora of resources. Later on, we're going to encourage you to take a look at the website that Count Me In provides fantastic resources for educators, families, community agencies, and community partners, as well as hosting. Jess also hosts a series of attendance coordinator monthly Zooms. You can also find information about that on the Count Me In website. So I'm going to, before I pass off to Jess, I want to give you just a little tiny bit of background information about the inception of the Attendance Toolkit. In 2018, we had some members at the Office of School and Student Support, and they were provided the opportunity to, through legislative actions, to undertake a comprehensive attendance initiative, looking at a holistic approach to supportive services for children to ensure they were attending school and receiving the necessary supports for positive educational outcomes. Through these efforts, the Comprehensive Attendance Resource Guide was developed. That is currently housed on our attendance website, if you wish to look into that. It was developed using the whole school, whole child, whole community model as a blueprint for its collaborative work. In particular, the Office of School and Student Supports utilized the model as the backbone of its comprehensive attendance initiative. While this resource continues to be housed on the Maine DOE website, it was felt a more accessible, up-to-date resource would be beneficial. So the Maine Department of Education expanded a key partnership that we have with Count Me In, and we contracted with Jess Anderson to use the initial comprehensive attendance resource guide as a framework to draft a revised, more succinct attendance toolkit. One of the things we love about our new toolkit is it's only 12 pages long. It's very, very clearly organized, easy to access. Jess took a look at the initial framework and she drafted a revised toolkit. She then shared her initial content with over 20 schools across the state, and she garnered feedback from multiple teams within the Maine DOE. This past August, there was a soft launch of the Maine Department of Education Attendance Toolkit through a series of informational sessions at the Maine Educator Summit. Today, we're going to explore page 1, the basics. We're going to look at the importance of student attendance and how this information is designed to help school staff understand how attendance can impact a variety of health factors for students relating to health services, school climate, family engagement, and community involvement. I invite you to join Jess Anderson as she shares resources, strategies, and implementation success stories related to the basics of the Maine DOE Attendance Toolkit. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm passing the baton. Please share your information with us.
Awesome. And I am seeing some familiar names and faces. So folks from schools that have worked with me or attended things, feel free to chime in or send me a message and remind me of cool things I've told you. So I'm so glad to be here and be able to share some of the basics with you. If you can't already recognize where I am, I'm where I always am when I Zoom with you, in my car. That might be a virtual background. It might really be my car. So let's dive in. I think I can share my screen with you so you'll be able to see the pieces. And I see that Sarah just dropped the link to the toolkit in the chat for you. So if you haven't downloaded that, you can take a look. So thankfully, to some amazing feedback, there is now a table of contents. So those of you that might have looked at this before, it has been revised. So you do get a nice table of contents. And again, I'm just going to talk about the basics today. So when we think about the basics, if I had to boil down what you need to do to improve attendance into one page, this is the one page. You need to be looking at your data. You need to be looking at it collaboratively with a team, and that team needs to use the data to make a plan. Sounds really simple. As you dig into the pieces, it gets more and more complex. So the first resource here on the basics page is the DOE's website for attendance. And I just just want to draw your attention to one thing, and I love that Bear is here. There is one thing on this page beyond the toolkit and the support plan and all the other things there that I send schools to all the time. And right now, with our current truancy statute, that is this optional form for determining truancy. So just in case your protocols at your school and your procedures in your district have not been updated in the last 5 years, the truancy statute was updated in the last 5 years and is being revised again. And this is an amazing tool to look at. So that is the one thing from this page that I draw your attention to. And I would also point out there's some historical information here that is also really helpful. And there's linked to the statutes, which is also really helpful to kind of ground your work. What are we talking about? As a school, what do I need to do? What do I have to do based on statutory requirements? So starting there is a great place so you understand what you have to do. Then the next link, so if we go here, our next link jumps you to an example tracker. This is all fake names, fake numbers. Okay, it was created using, I don't know, copy and paste. So it doesn't make tons of sense in terms of the summary, but this is an example of a way to look at your data that makes it a little bit more actionable than just pulling a report and looking at a piece of paper, which is, I know, where most of us start the work. So you have the individual student data. This is capturing some monthly totals and then capturing some of the categories that a school might want to look at. So absence excused, tardies, absence unexcused. The key piece, I think, for this and setting up a tracker for yourself is looking at the rate, using the rate instead of a number of days to intervene, and using some conditional formatting in your data tracker to make it easier to prioritize or triage what's going on. The other piece that I encourage is having some summary data. There isn't an easy way in most school information systems to know what your chronic absence rate is. So while we need to be accountable to that data, it's really hard to put your fingers on it. And so this automatically captures that rate for you when you update the spreadsheet. If you go to the toolkit and the data tracker isn't working for you, email me, connect me with your most technologically savvy person on your team, and I will help them for free to figure out how to do the thing. Just email me. Okay. If you have PowerSchool, there is, and use quick exports, there is code information here. There's also a link to the truancy law and other information at the bottom of this support, but come up with a tracker. If you are looking for help using Infinite Campus, using PowerSchool, using Web to School to build a tracker, email me and I will connect you to a school. A great example of an application of this is Gorham Schools had one school who is connecting with Count Me In to get some supports for the elementary school. I helped the elementary school build the tracker. Then their district data person was like, oh, I can do better than that. Built an amazing tracker that they used district-wide, which made some of the principals become competitive because they could see each other's school's data. In another district, by looking at the data, they've realized that their internships, their ELO experiences, were being marked as excused absences. That was the practice. Now, I love that kids are getting out and learning in the field, but they are learning. That is part of their education. So until they looked at the data, they didn't change to using a different attendance code, one that counted them as present, remote present, to be exact. So 2 applications of how that can help you. The third tool here comes from Attendance Works, which if you're not familiar with Attendance Works, there are tons of self-assessments on Attendance Works. This is what I would start with if you're just building a team or trying to figure out if your team works or how your team is working. So this is a self-assessment. You can go through piece by piece. It's a little overwhelming if you try to sit down and do the whole thing in one sitting. So maybe even just folding one piece of this self-reflection into what's going on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can look and see what the chats are without you all seeing that. But I do want to give another example of teaming around attendance. So Holton Southside School emailed me. I asked how they got their rates so low. And they have a person who's managing their data and doing a lot of asynchronous work with their team. So your team doesn't necessarily have to have tons of in-person time. They were just communicating really well and effectively with a core hub. So I also want to kind of push that out to you to kind of think about what your teaming structure might look like. I'm just coming from Ellsworth High School. Ellsworth High School has a tiered structure with different teams. So they have a tier 1 team happening kind of across the school, their department heads. Then their tier 2 attendance work is built into their grade level PLCs. And their tier 3 attendance work is built in their Community Connect, which is a piece of what used to be BAR there. Now they're just using more of a risk for you model without BAR. So you can weave these pieces in as you start to understand what the basic elements are and how they might fit in your system. I'm going to look through. So I am looking through the chat to see who kind of commented on a couple of these pieces. And Laura asked a question about the toolkit, Sarah, and I'm not sure if you want to answer that, if that first page is supposed to be clickable.
So I do know that one of the things that our communications team has worked with closely is to make sure that the resources are all linked. Let me see, when we're supposed to be able to click the toolkit picture and have it be a link. I'll take that feedback and check in with the comms team. And Laura, I'll get back to you with information about that. I'm not certain exactly what is happening when you're doing that, but let me look into that. Sometimes I will tell you, we have had an enormous collaboration in this endeavor. People have, it has been an ongoing process. As I said, I believe back to 2018, its roots, and then Jess really took a phenomenal role in revising it. At that time, there was feedback from all types of different offices throughout the DOE and many of the schools that Jess was currently working with. So let me see about that, and I will anticipate an email answering that. Okay, thank you. Couple things that I did want to talk about that just circle back to that you mentioned, Jess. Attendance works and the number of resources that are available. As I said in our opening, I did indicate that Count Me In has a plethora of resources that I find to be very, very helpful. Attendance Works does as well. We're in the process of revising, revamping, updating, chiseling up our attendance website. Not going to lie, right now it is in great need of a little bit of TLC. So please, in the future, I can't give you a date on it, but little by little, we are really seeking to revamp that so that you will be very easily able to access those resources that Jess talked about. The other thing I did want to talk about super quickly, touch on, and Jess, correct me if I'm incorrect on this. I believe you were talking to me about one of your schools that when they were looking at their attendance, they had not previously reviewed the data and their numbers were a little bit rough. And then all of a sudden, when they started looking at it, they realized that they had a number of students that were out in the field having some mentor opportunities. And because they were not in the classroom setting, they were being marked as absent. Am I correct in that, Jess?
Yeah, so there actually were 3 high schools in the last school year, who were getting Count Me In support. And as they peeled back, looking at their data regularly, they started to notice some trends. So whether that was mentoring, senior privilege, pieces around ELOs or field trips, there were attendance codes that were mapping to things that weren't in their best interest. So they were continuing to learn. They might have even been under the supervision of teachers in that work or school staff in that work. But the way it was getting noted in the data system was a glitch. The other challenge that happens, and we all know this, was when students leave our schools, we need to wait for formal transition to exit them from our systems. And sometimes out of sight, out of mind, it can be hard to follow up on that. And so that's another challenge that often comes when you're looking at the data. You start to realize, wait, there are 6 kids on this list who aren't enrolled anymore. but we haven't made it through the formal exit process for whatever reason.
What I loved about that, Jess, is just fresh eyes on data and looking for the patterns and what an impact that can make if you are really trying to just tweak your numbers. So we're at the, oops, yeah.
Let me add one more thing. So the other thing when we think about the data, if you're looking just at the students who are struggling, it can be hard to recognize the successes. And so one of the reasons in the data tracker, that includes all students, so that there are some schools who are working towards, right, a positive goal. They want to have 90% of their students attending 95% or more of the time, or they want to have fewer students in the at-risk category. And so by looking more holistically at the data, sometimes it can flip our lens on the challenge and we're able to do something different because of that.
I love that. I love that. And it's just about really establishing a team. We one of the overarching points that we really need to take away is attendance is not a one person deal. This is a team effort. And what we're seeing throughout the entire state is teams that are the districts that are able to create a team and create a plan that they stick with are seeing enormous success. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to shift now and give you an opportunity to go into breakout rooms for, let's say, about 15-ish minutes. And while you're in the breakout room, I'd love to have you spend about 5 minutes discussing how you are currently accessing and using attendance data. After you've had a chance to talk about that, I'd love it if you could shift your conversation to how your team is organized around the use of data. When we return to the larger group, I'm going to ask you to just summarize that and drop in our chat a way that we could help support you in better accessing and using data. So I'm going to leave that in the chat, and I'm going to invite you to go into a breakout room. And let's see, we'll come back together at, let's say, 4:15. 4:15. Where's that going?
Yes.
Okay.